Hello guys, gals and non-binary pals, welcome back to Budget Brew with me, Lotus. Today we're going to be looking at Tor Wauki the Younger for under $30 TCG market average price. So Tor Wauki the Younger is 3 black red for a legendary creature human archer with reach and lifelink. It's a 3/3, so if another source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1 to that permanent or player instead. Then, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Tor Wauki the Younger deals 2 damage to any target. So this is a life-linking direct damage, reward you for instants and non-combat damage. And yeah, it's a really fun deck to play. You can see it on the MTG Filthy Casuals stream and see how it did. But before we get into it, I'd just like you to consider to subscribe, support us on Patreon, and more importantly, just come to our Discord and chat with us. We have so many little discussions, checking out all the spoilers, which are non-stop, but it's a nice little community. But as always, we start with the ramp. Arcane Signet and Commander Sphere are always good for this sort of thing. A Glittering Stockpile is 2 and a red for an artifact treasure that you can add red and then put a stash counter on it, but then you can actually sacrifice it to add X mana of any one colour, where X is the number of stash counters on it for a quick burst late in the game. Navigation Orb to help us go get some basic lands. Pyromancer's Goggles adds red. When the mana is spent to cast a red instant or sorcery spell, we can copy the spell. Rakdos Cluestone, Rakdos Locket and Rakdos Signet to help us with the multicolour aspect. And Stone Speaker Crystal, a 4 mana artifact that adds 2, but we can pay 2, tap and sacrifice it to exile any number of target players' graveyards and draw a card. So much in such a little card. I love this one. Now we go on to card advantage. In red and black, it's a little bit different to just card draw. Big Score is 3 and a red for an instant. As an additional cost, we discard a card, but we get to draw 2 cards and create 2 treasures. Browbeat is 2 and a red for a sorcery. Any player may have this deal them 5 damage. With our commander, it's +1. If no one does, anyone can draw 3 cards, but we're going to target ourselves. Cathartic Pyre is 1 and a red. We get to choose one. We get to deal 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker, or we can discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many, throwing away what we don't want and potentially drawing into what we do. Faithless Looting, draw 2, then discard 2, and we can also flashback this. Bearing in mind that every spell that we're casting that's an instant sorcery triggers our commander to deal 2 lifelink damage to any target. Light Up the Stage, 2 and a red, or Spectacle for 1. Exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards, so lands included. Reckless Impulse, 1 and a red, exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. We may play those cards. Risk Factor, similar to Browbeat, 2 and a red. Target opponent may have Risk Factor deal them 4 damage to them. If that player doesn't, you draw 3 cards, and we can cast this from our graveyard with the Jumpstart ability. Seize the Spoils is 2 and a red for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card, but again, draw 2 cards and create 1 treasure token. And finally, Thrill of Possibility, 1 and a red for an instant. As additional cost, we discard a card, but we draw 2. So, being a burn deck, removal is going to be everywhere. Anger of the Gods will deal 3+1 to each creature, and will exile any creatures that died. Blasphemous Act is 8 and a red, but costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield, and will deal 13 damage to each creature, potentially wiping a board. With our commander, it's 14 damage. Blazing Volley, 1 damage to each creature opponents control. Burn Down the House, 3 red, choose one, and can deal 5 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. or we can create 3 1/1 red devil creature tokens with when this creature dies, it deals 1 damage to any target and they gain haste until end of turn. Electrickery, single red. It deals 1 damage to target creature we don't control, but for 1 and a red we can overload it and deal 1 damage to each creature we don't control. End the Festivities is 1 mana, deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. Falthis Shadowcat Familiar, 2 and a black for a 2/2 Nightmare Cat. Commanders you control have Menace and Death Touch. So every time we cast an instant sorcery, that 2 damage that we can point anywhere can kill a creature as long as it's not indestructible because it now has Death Touch. Feed the Swarm, 1 and a black, destroy a creature or enchantment and we lose life equal to its mana cost. So we're difficult when there's a lot of enchantments, but Feed the Swarm is one of those cards that can help. Flame Spill, 2 and a red for an instant. It deals 4 damage to target creature. Excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. Goblin Chainwhirler is a first striking 3/3 goblin, but when it enters the battlefield it does 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. Mizium Mortars, 1 and a red, deals 4 damage to target creature you don't control. Again, overload it to deal 4 damage to every creature we don't control. Pestilence, 2 black for an enchantment. At the end of any turn, if there are no creatures in play, we sacrifice it. But for a black, we can deal 1 damage to each creature and player. Again, with our commander, you add an additional 1. Pestilent Spirit, 2 and a black for a Menace Death Touch spirit that's a 3/2. But more importantly, instant and sorcery spells you control have Death Touch. So all of those deal 1 damage to each creature we don't control suddenly become board wipes, one-sided. Rakdos Charm, 2 exile cards from target player's graveyard, get rid of an artifact, or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. Slagstorm, 1 red, we get to choose one of the following. It deals 3 damage to each creature, or it deals 3 damage to each player. Smash the Smithereens is we destroy an artifact and it deals 3 damage to that artifact's controller. And we have Structural Assault, 3 red for a sorcery, destroy all artifacts, then Structural Assault deals damage to each creature equal to the number of artifacts that were put into graveyards from the battlefield this turn. Unlicensed Disintegration, 1 black for an instant, destroy target creature if you control an artifact. Unlicensed Disintegration deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. Moving on, we can try and double up our effects with Double Vision, 3 red for an enchantment. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Dualcaster Mage, 1 red for a human wizard with flash. When it enters, copy target instant or sorcery spell. And Krark the Thumbless, 1 and a red. Whenever you cast instant or sorcery, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, return that spell to its owner's hand. If you win the flip, copy the spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. Even if we cast the spell and we have to return it to our hand, because we've cast the instant or sorcery, our commander will still trigger doing the 2 damage. The punishment effects to punish our players for actually just playing the game. Fate Unraveler, 3 and a black for a hag. Whenever an opponent draws a card, it deals 1 damage to that player. With our commander, that's 2. Harsh Mentor, whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land on the battlefield, if it isn't a mana ability, this deals 2 damage to that player. Karavek the Merciless, 5 black for a 5/4 human shaman. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, Karavek the Merciless deals damage equal to that spell's converted mana cost to any target. This one has won me games. Sir Conrad the Grim, 3 black for a human knight. Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves our graveyard, this deals 1 damage to each opponent. For 1 and a black, each player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. You'll be surprised how much damage this can do, especially when our commander is making it 2 damage. We have Tybalt, Rakish, Instigator, 2 and a black for a Planeswalker Tybalt. Your opponents can't gain life, it's always a benefit. Plus the little devils can deal 1 damage to any target, which will then be doubled up to 2 because of the +1 our commander gives. And Underworld Dreams to stop those card draw decks from drawing too much without a little bit of pain. Moving on to direct damage. This is another way that we just win, is just by burning people out. A Braid, it's a nice little combo thing where we can either destroy an artifact or deal 3 damage to a creature to try and kill it. Area of Flame is 2 and a red for an enchantment. When it enters, each opponent gains 10 life. Seems like a big negative, however, whenever you cast instant or sorcery, you put a verse counter on this. Then it deals damage equal to the number of verse counters on it to target player or planeswalker with our commander +1. Blightning, 1 black-red for a sorcery, deals 3 damage to target player, and then that player discards 2 cards. Brash Taunter, 4 and a red for a goblin with indestructible for this 1/1. Whenever this is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent, and then this can fight another creature. We have Flame Rift, 1 and a red, it deals 4 damage to each player. Lightning Bolt for 3 damage to any target. Lightning Strike for 3 damage to any target. Sizzle, 2 and a red, deals 3 damage to each opponent. Now we should increase the damage. Angrath's Marauders, if a source we would control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to a permanent or player instead. Chandra's Incinerator, 5 and a red, but it costs X less to cast, where X is the total amount of non-combat damage dealt to your opponents this turn. It's a 6/6 with trample. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, Chandra's Incinerator deals that much damage to target creature or planeswalker that player controls. Electrostatic Field, it's the defender that whenever you cast instant sorcery, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Fire Servant, 3 red for a 4/3 elemental. If a red instant or sorcery spell you control would deal damage, it deals double that damage instead. Firebrand Archer, whenever we cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Gutterstipe, again, deals 2 damage to each opponent. Jaya, if another red source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much +1 to a permanent player instead, and we can have Jaya deal 2 damage to any target. Kessig Flamebreaker, 1 and a red, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this deals 1 damage to each opponent. Smouldering Egg, 1 and a red for a defender, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you put a number of ember counters on Smouldering Egg equal to the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. Then, if Smouldering has 7 or more counters on it, remove them and transform it. Once Smouldering Egg has transformed, it will become Ashmouth Dragon. It's a 4/4 with flying that whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Ashmouth Dragon deals 2 damage to any target. Thermo Alchemist, a defender with tap, deal 1 damage to each opponent, and whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, untap it. Toralf, God of Fury, 2 red for a trample 5/4 god. Whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent control is dealt excess non-combat damage, Toralf deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. Torbrand, Thane of Redfell, 1 and triple red. If a source you control would deal damage to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage +2. And then we go on to the mana base. Commander Tower for any colour, Rakdos Guildgate for 1 of the 2, Smouldering Marsh for 1 of the 2 as well. Shivan Gorge is 2 and a red, and it can deal 1 damage to each opponent, which with our commander becomes 2. And Sulphurous Mire, again, for another way of getting the multicolours. We finish off with 18 mountains and 11 swamps to round off the deck. And there's the deck list. As you can see, it's $29.94 as TCG market price as time of recording. As always, we don't count the price for basic lands, but as you can see, the deck is not expensive at all and it does pack a punch. What are your thoughts? What would you add? What would you change? How would you make it your way? I'd love to hear them and comment below. Otherwise, share this around, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.